Yeah, I see that.
Okay, since we don't have Leticia, are you okay, Kelsey?
Yeah, we're recording.
Okay, great. We didn't want to waste time because we know that we really value also the discussion and conversation. So, David, if you don't mind, we'll probably have you sit, or do you want to stand?
I'd rather stand.
Okay, fantastic. Just know that there's a camera right there.
Side or up front?
So side is,
Whichever. I can move the camera.
if you don't mind.
No. So just a little bit of bio and background. I think when Maggie and I spoke with David, we were very excited to be talking to him because a lot of the work conversations that I know we've had with each other through our cohort have been around organizational change, culture, and human resources. And so we're really fortunate. He's been at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation since 1998. And really his ethos has been to structure a human resources system for a growing organization of remarkable people committed to accomplishing great things in health and health care. And he believes the role of human resources in a social change organization is one that fosters an atmosphere of open communication, mutual respect, and professional development so that leaders, staff, and the entire organization can fulfill its potential. And I know that really resonates with this group. And prior to his position at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, he served 19 years at Rutgers. He also shared with us that he's been through multiple CEO transitions. And so I really think that he gave us some insights into that. And so we're really looking forward to him sharing and having a candid conversation with us about organizational effectiveness and what we as potential CEOs would need to know.
And just to add on, when we talked to David, we reinforced that this is a confidential room, and we're hoping that you would be as candid and open with us. So it's so great to meet you in person.
Well, everybody just stand up for a second and wiggle around. Shake it off. Try to get your mind clicking again. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We actually do at the foundation. We have signs at all our conference rooms. If you sit for 60, you stand for 3. So whenever there's a 60-minute of a meeting, at least there's a 3-minute break. We do it with our trustees. We do it with everyone. And most of the time, we're able to keep people's attention. Most of the time. Well, as you get seated again, and if you want to stand, please let me start out by a disclaimer. Someone better than me was supposed to be here to talk to you today. And if she was here today, she would be much more entertained and enlightened than I will do for you. But I will do my best. I am not a traditional human resources person. I was a musician through college. I ended up going into student affairs accidentally. So for all the people who tell you to put your 5-year career goal on paper, I'm certainly not one of those people. I ended up accidentally in human resources. I hated human resources. I had all the impressions that many of you share about human resources. Gatekeepers, morals, policemen, exactly. And I had never in a positive way, and I won't tell you the negative, been in a human resources office in my career. So suddenly I was in human resources, and was an anti-human resource person. And it was an interesting and bizarre place to be, and it is still the place where I live now. I don't like human resources. I don't like anything. I checked, and no one here's an HR officer. You're going to go back to you and say, this is Las Vegas rules, right? I know some HR officers, right? And that's been really wonderful for me. And I think it's been an asset to the organizations I've been in because I said there's different ways to connect with employees. And actually, I want to take a 2-second break and just play a little game, okay? So think for a second about how many hours a day you work. Think how many, and you know what? Let's make it as liberal as possible and say that will start from the time you wake up to go to work. If it's not the time you would normally wake up on a non-work day, count that time. Count your commute. Count when you get home, whenever you get home. Count the number of minutes or hours you're virtually logged in. Take a second and come up with those numbers. Yeah, too many. How many? Give me some numbers. 17. Yeah, and how many hours a day?
15.
How many?
15.
It's 15 hours.
Yeah.
15. Does that work for? It's high. So you want to go 12?
No, I would go lower.
Oh,
I want to work today.
You're our new model.
What do you mean you? Yeah.
Okay, well, let's compromise at 12. 12 work. We'll still prove my point. 12 hours. How many hours of sleep do you get?
7 hours sleep. Too little.
Yeah, okay. Let's go with 7. This is a very analytical, research-oriented exam. So we had a dozen, and we had 7, and that's 19 hours. Am I right? Am I doing okay? Yeah, I'm an HR person. I'm not in that position. And as I calculated, at least 5 hours left in the day, correct? And 5 hours is what we collectively call life, correct? You want to take a moment and think about that? The majority of your waking hours, the majority of our waking hours are spent at work. Okay, so that's point 1. No matter how many hours you pick for work, I guarantee you that the majority of your hours are going to be spent at work. Okay, so that's piece 1. The next piece is, are you ready? Where did you? I mean, I read through some of your bios, and I am humbled and almost appalled that I am here in your midst, because you're amazing people. So I know you have an answer for this question. Where did you formally learn to work? Your mom, your parents, your first job as a kid. You know, in that way, I don't know anymore. Back when I was a kid, you get allowance for doing chores.
Oh,
no,
not at my house.
but you had the chores.
Oh, the chores were definitely there.
Okay, so whether it's paid or unpaid, you were working.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. But that's not the question I asked. I asked you where you learned to formally work. Well-educated, well-experienced group of people. Where did you formally learn to work? Oh, thank you for that answer. No, not in grammar school, not in middle school, not in high school, not in college, not in graduate school. Never learned to work. And in that answer, so defines the challenge that I've had for 31 years being in the resources. No one learns to work. There's no consistency in what our expectations are, in what our needs are, in what our habits are, in what our skills are, and how we best implement them so that we're not falling asleep 3/4 of the way during the day, but we're sort of jazzed and into what we're doing. We never learn how to formally work. So HR offices over the course of time have not addressed that issue, have not addressed that gap, because they're usually too busy making sure the organization's compliant, people are doing the right thing. If disciplinary procedures are needed, they're there to help. That's not at all what we do where I work. Not at all. What we do much more of is trying to get some consistency and understanding of what work means. And that leads into things like culture and how you create culture. By the way, one of the things that we talked about was how culture is created in an organization. So how in your mind is culture created? Yeah, but I heard behaviors, I heard leadership. Well, good, more. Interactions. Very nuanced interactions. The thing that we don't pay enough attention to is those nuanced interactions, the water cooler stuff. They having a cup of coffee stuff. It's a few people going out for a drink after work stuff. That, I would suggest, is where culture is created. Yes, leaders absolutely help establish culture. There's no doubt about that. I have 3 presidents now. I've had 3 very, very, very different presidents, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Some of what we went through in our just finished presidential search, and some of the things I think you should keep in mind, having been on the other side of the table as a potential candidate. But very different cultures, very different leaders, very different ideas about what the culture of our foundation should be. We do great stuff. I mean, you're really leading off in a very positive way. We do great stuff. People who work with us have always or usually been on the other side asking for funds to do great stuff and trying to figure out how to make the penny stretch. And now they're in a $10.5 billion organization that puts $500 million out on the street every year. What could be better? What could be better? But our people are stressed. They feel overworked. They have anxiety. One of the leading issues in our health benefits experience is related to anxiety and stress. More than any other physical problem. Stress. How could you be stressed putting $500 million a year out on the street? I did not grow up with memes. So when I hear those numbers, my knees start to quiver. How could that be stressful? Yet, when we do all of our engagement surveys and our satisfaction surveys in the past, and I'll talk about that in a minute, we hear our staff is stressed. And all of that has to do with the culture that we create and how we directly address that stress. No, you shouldn't be stressed working in an organization like this. If you're out working on the railroad in 95-degree heat trying to replace railroad ties and you see a train coming down the line, that's stress. Right? Not sitting at your desk trying to come up with great ideas to improve the health and healthcare of the country. Most organizations don't go at stress as a part of their culture. We do. We don't embrace just the happy, joy stuff. And that's really where my role in the institution comes in, because I serve as a connector between all those stressed out people, including senior executives. I will tell you, I have advised and counseled tons of people in my career, and never have I heard a different story from the person who's on the bottom of the hierarchy in the institution than from the people at the top. All nervous about one thing or another for good reason, by the way. Yet we don't in organizations embrace that as part of our culture. We do at the foundation. We'll do 3 o'clock stress breaks. We don't call them stress breaks, but they're things that put a smile on your face and get you up and moving around. And for 15 lousy minutes, get you away from your desk and hang out with other staff members to do something. Today we're doing a farmer's market in the atrium of our building. We bring in a local farmer, we've got tables out, you get a brown bag, you put $5 in a donation kitty, and you get to fill your bag with farmer stuff. That, because it's a cool thing to do, and because it goes to some of the interests people have, and because it's just an icebreaker, creates culture. And by the way, culture means fun to me. If I am not having fun doing what I'm doing, I'm going to be bored in no time flat. And I've spent a whole career being serious and trying to be really honest and serious and intellectual about what I'm doing. But the thing that makes a difference for me is fun. I had fun for 19 years at Rutgers University, staff of 11,000. I did everything a normal HR person could do, from collective bargaining with all the unions that were on campus, to recruitment, to compensation, to benefits. I didn't like the division, so before they got ready to fire me, I said, we need to change things here, and they bought it. And we changed our division and started to think differently about how we connected with people, the people who were producing the product at the university. 11,000. I I can tell you that it's a heck of a lot easier creating culture in a small organization of 280 people where I am now than 11,000, because with those numbers you hide behind people. There's really nothing you can do. But where we are now, shame on me and shame on our organization if we can't move the culture to a place that is vibrant and ends up producing the type of environment that's created. I not only have HR, I have administration. What that means where I am is I have facilities, 80 acres of property, 35 of which is consumed by our building. I have our dining service, I have our fitness center, I have our travel services, I have all the other things that accommodate our staff. And you can bet not one of those things is so overwhelmed by policy that it makes any of our staff members feel burdened as they engage. Whether they're eating food or working out or traveling, we've changed our travel policy to allow greater benefits for staff who have to take red eyes, because we know there are a lot of parents who want to get home to their kids, and it's important for that part of their life to feel complete if they're going to give that other part of their life to us. And by the way, the most hours they spend away every day. And because they've never learned how to work normally, there's no consistency between their expectations. So trying to knit together those expectations and create culture is an incredibly important part of what we do. And by the way, I believe culture bubbles up from the bottom. Yes, I believe the seed. So here's a great story. Our former CEO, Lisa LaVuto-More, just a wonderful human being and a good friend, and I can tell you, Las Vegas rules at the beginning of our relationship, we did not get along at all. I thought, this is my last ride at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and it was only at her going away party that her husband said to me, she comes home every night and says, what the expletive deleted am I going to do with that Waldman guy? 15 years later, I finally found out the truth. Turns out to be one of my best colleagues, best friends, most wonderful, wonderful mentors, but just a brilliant, down-to-earth person. She came in, and we butt heads over what culture was at the foundation and what she wanted to see and what I wanted to see. Her attitude was, I don't prefer surprises. And my attitude about that was, you are risk-averse. Polar opposite. We were both wrong. We pulled that together, and then through that, recognized that the issues that we had were likely the issues our psyche. I'm sorry, I keep on turning my back. That's good. The issues that we had were no different than the issues our staff had. So that as we started to come together many, many years ago, we started to think about how the differences we had translated into the differences staff had, because we never learned to work formally. She had a particular position on risk. I had a particular position on risk. Neither one of us was right. Neither one of us was wrong. And there was no common ground for us. We found it, though. And then we used that as a way to think about how we engage staff and what we do. Now, Risa set an amazing tone for culture. By the way, the funny story is, and I see it with our new CEO, a gentleman named Richard Besser, is she used to go into the fitness center every morning. She was an animal. She used to climb mountains. So she used to walk 8 hours from Princeton to our property with a 50-pound pack on her back. Now, I don't know if you've ever met Risa, but she makes me look like a giant, okay? And she would be in at the fitness center at 6:30 in the morning. And I can't tell you how the population of the fitness center at 6:30 in the morning blossoms. 6:30. And then the moment she stopped going because she started doing other types of workouts, downturn. Sets culture. It sets the tone. New president just came in a couple months ago. He's working out in the fitness center at 6:30 in the morning. The fitness center attendance goes from 5 very lonely people. And by the way, we have great fitness center attendance overall, so it's really an anomaly that it's so little in the morning, to 20 people now, all in there because The CEOs on the treadmill, walking, they absolutely set the tone of the culture, and it's not by some huge imperative. I don't believe in that sort of stuff. Human behavior is nuanced, and it's tweaked in nuanced ways. My graduate degree is in counseling. I believe that you make change through individual people, not through fiat, not through policy, not through all. Now, that's not to say all those things don't play a role. But if you take a look at a pie, my feeling is it's a small part of the pie. Culture is created by the way staff members talk about the organization to each other, the way they talk about the organization when they go home. By the way, we do lots of family stuff. So the kids, the spouses, they get to come in and they get to see what mom or dad are doing during the course of the day. And that also is an important part of our culture. And how we set up their families framed on what mom or dad are doing during the course of the day. So that when they go home to do that part that we call life, that's the smallest number of waking hours we experience, there's some sort of connection that creates culture. We've had so many consultants come in, and some of you are aware of organizations that have been ruined temporarily by consultants coming in. And I won't mention any of the names of the large companies that are responsible for this, and they implement these culture-changing initiatives. And what happens most of the time? They fail. Short lifespan, they fail, and very often, because it was such an important issue that failed, staff become more resentful than they were before they started the process of culture change. This is not rocket science. State college educated on both the undergrad and grad level, I don't have nearly the brains anyone in this room has. This is not rocket science. This is really simple stuff. Because what we're trying to do is create a world at work that's not a totally different set of rules than your out-of-life work. So lots of people say, so how do you do this? How do you have that conversation on all different types of topics? And I say, well, if you were speaking to someone you care deeply about, how would you have that conversation? And they look at me like I've got 4 eyes. I guess it's because I wear glasses sometimes, but that doesn't have anything to do with this part of the story. And I say, don't you translate your experiences out of work and how you behave and what relationships are like and the difficulty and the successes and the tough conversations and the joyous conversations and the celebrations to what you do at work? And almost always the answer is no. People see that there's a different set of rules and behaviors for the workplace, and that is wrong. Absolutely wrong. Yes, there are different issues that we have to deal with at work, and the people we deal with at work aren't family members, but the way you form a relationship is no different at work than it is outside of work. Stand in line at a grocery store. Some people you will ignore. Some people you will talk to. Some people will talk to you and you'll think they're crazy. I'm just here to buy carrots and lettuce. Why are they talking to me? You can translate all of those interactions to the same sort of issues staff bring forward in the workplace. Yet they don't know how to resolve them. Managers don't know. Managers come all the time and say, how do I do this? What do I think about? And I ask them the simple questions about what they would do in a similar situation in life. They have an answer. They never hesitate. They always have an answer. But we don't translate that stuff into the workplace. One of the most important things we did during the strategic planning, 2 years before Lisa left, we did an 18-month strategic planning process. And it actually surprised the heck out of all of us because we came out with something we never imagined. We expected slight tweaks to what we've always been doing in health and healthcare. And out of it came this notion of a culture of health. It was a culture of health. Culture of health is where everything that you think about in your life, the way streets and cities are designed, the way supermarkets are available to people, all the different things, like playgrounds for kids, recess for kids, good nutrition at lunch for kids, walking paths, safe place to play ball or skip rope or do all those things. All those things, they don't necessarily have to do directly with healthcare. We're part of the big picture. And that for years, while we were focused on health and healthcare, we were missing the big picture. So we came out with the big picture. Surprisingly, out of all of us, I can tell you. Lisa herself, at the end of the 18 months, said, I never thought I was going down this road, ever. We came out with this notion called the culture of health. But part of that process, you get all the executives in rooms, and you get trustees in rooms, you get outside facilitators walking you through all the processes they do. We engaged our staff. And the way we did that was through two activities that I will never forget, and I think they were some of the smartest things we could have done, because when we finally put the strategy in place, our staff, through our maintenance folks, understood why we were doing it. We engaged them in two ways. One, we did a Learn-a-Palooza, where we did TED Talks, where we sort of did stations where like somebody was at a buffet where they could go and get, this or that or the other thing, where people could learn about the current state of health in this country. How much our GDP goes to healthcare, how we rate against other countries. Oh, God, it's heartbreaking. Really heartbreaking. Opportunities that were coming out of new science and technology. And then we created what we call the Band of 40. And it was just a lighthearted joke at first that turned into something really smart. 40 staff members from around the foundation that had nothing to do with program development. And we let them take a look at the strategy. And in that, we asked them to think about the strategy from their point of view as an employee, and we set up groups, and I love this idea. So I don't know about you, but in foundations, at least in our foundation, everyone is very polite. It's sickening at one point. This is Las Vegas rules. It's sickening at one point because you see it takes days and weeks and months to get to something because people are bowing and curtsying with each other. So in order, and I have no time, I'm in my 60s, I have no time for that. I don't want to die waiting for the outcomes. So what I did was, when we put together this Band of 40 and we were looking at specific parts of the strategy, was to appoint someone to be the pain in the ass, excuse my language, the provocateur, the person who was, whether they believed it or not, would say, this is stupid. And let me tell you something, those people had a hell of a lot of fun doing it, and there were a lot of laughs as we went through it. But the fact of the matter is, that band of 40 staff members, none of which had anything to do with program development, came up with such important feeders to this strategy that I remember we had a board meeting. The board meeting was on Wednesday, and Tuesday we did a workshop with this Band of 40, and the consultants that we had in helping, we sat till 8 or 9 o'clock at night rushing to take the information that had come out of the Band of 40 meeting to get it to the trustees. The trustees were blown away. We had thoughts that none of the people who had been in the process up to that point in time had before. That creates culture. Because we had facilities people walking around the building talking about why it was so important that people lived in safe facilities, that people were able to go to the food store and not go to a store that had rotten food for $7 a piece. It was an amazing way to create our culture and to create inclusion. So simple things, lots of bottom up. It's like a sandwich in my mind. There's got to be that thought process at the top and some consistency amongst the senior executives at the top. That's not to say they can't disagree or voice opposition, but there still has to be some basic consistency and buy-in at that level, and then you push it from the bottom, please.
You said that you had kind of these pointed pains in the ass. Was your goal with that to get other people who maybe had some concerns to finally speak up?
Yes.
Because Steve went first, I'm going to go in two now.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it. Yeah, it worked like a charm. Because you take the first step and say, this stinks, and I'm going to be emboldened a little bit. And then when I realize I'm working in a place where I can say this stinks, and the HR guy isn't going to pull me into his office and walk me out of the building, that creates culture. People are afraid of work. Hold on. There is a basic fear in everyone about work. Working with senior executives over all these years, especially through presidential changes, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? What will I do next? So if people think that when you move certain levels up in an organization, that fear is suddenly gone, you are wrong. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So what happens when
when Steve speaks up and no one else speaks up.
Well,
But you know the culture needs improvement.
the provocateur push. Come on, you don't agree with me? Really, you don't agree with me on that point? Well, yeah, maybe I do. So if people didn't just speak up to follow the leader, we pushed them to follow the leader. I got to tell you, this was not a problem. It may be a problem in other organizations, but when it was safe territory, none of our executives were in that meeting, by the way. Only I was there, and they know I'm a dummy, so I'm not going to be able to do anything negative to them. They felt no fear for me, which, by the way, is very unusual for an HR person. Yes, sir.
Well, Finish human resources play in making certain that our organizations are making the right strides around racial equity. And really curious to know if your organization or other organizations that you work with disaggregate data by race and gender to see where the disparities lie, so that they can come up with a plan to address the real issues and not talk about the real issues. We live and experience these issues on a daily basis. And it is very frustrating that people will experience the same culture come in and on certain things will turn a blind eye because they're not impacted by the policies and procedures in the same way that I am. And as a man of color, it's not always a comfortable thing. Speaking up is not always the comfortable thing. Like if you don't, no one else probably will because it's quite risky. It takes a lot of courage. But when you do speak up, others stand to benefit from it. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you pretty much answered your own question. And I'll use a very current example. We've had, for a number of years, we focused on DEI stuff related to our program development work, related to our grantees, related to creating a cadre of researchers who were better prepared and better known to be selected in organizations like ours. We didn't focus internally. We focused internally. Very frustrating. We had an African-American president. We had an African-American chief of staff. And we were still tiptoeing around some of these issues. And this is loud stuff. This is not quiet stuff. Creating and being in Princeton, believe it or not, it's hard to recruit people to our area because there's a stereotype of what Princeton is, and folks immediately think, I don't think I'm going to fit. And fit is so important. We've got a couple things going against us. If we don't create a safe environment for people to come in and feel welcome, comfortable, that their voices are heard no matter who they are or where they come from, we're never going to be successful. I mean, to me, that's everything. So just in this last few weeks, I tantrum. That's a great part of being in your position for a long time and being close to retirement. You can tantrum. You may not be there yet, but when you do, it is the most beautiful feeling in the world. 40 years of suppressed feelings. I tantrum. We had a diversity committee. They were doing maps of where people were from and all this sort of stuff. That doesn't make it a safe environment. It doesn't increase the opportunity for people to want to come to the organization. I tantrum. Staff, no executives there. Once again, culture pushing up from the bottom. Now, there's got to be receptivity at the top, and I knew there was, so it was kind of safe. We're pushing up from the bottom. And all of them tantrum and said, this is crazy. How can we do the work that we do if we don't have a better sense of diversity, both in the way we're comprised as a staff, 26% diversity, 74% Caucasian. It's sort of the way foundations are through a lot of the country. Not when, by the way, when I got there in 98, it was 13 or 12% diversity staff. Our board, which sat at a table like this, were all white, bald men. The reflection from the ceiling was blinding enough that you had to wear sunglasses. We were born out of the rib of Johnson & Johnson. And Johnson & Johnson is not known for its diversity, or certainly wasn't known for its diversity back then. So we've constantly been on a process around this. Well, we pushed, and now the whole organization is going to go through implicit bias training. Really great. We're going to use a tool called the IDI, which some of you may have heard about, coaching for every single person, and not just for program development staff, for every single person. Because I believe implicit bias, we put together great and diverse candidate pools. We just really work hard to get diversity in our team. But why aren't diverse candidates rising to the top? I think there's one answer. It's implicit bias. When you look at paper, everybody is so darn qualified. You could hire 20 of the people that are in the candidate pool and come out very satisfied. But the tapes that are in our heads from the time we're, and by the way, shut down after we're 10 or 11 years old, automatically start playing. And we've got to find a way to disrupt those tapes and get people to think about other people that we're bringing into the organization. So, creating a comfortable environment, creating a safe environment is where we're going. Are we there yet? Well, you know, my guess is it was a heck of a lot easier with an African-American president than it is now with the Caucasian president. By the way, this is an issue for me because when we introduced our new president, as excited as people were, there was sort of wide eyes in there. This is Las Vegas rules again. There were wide eyes in the room. I mean, are you kidding me? We've gone back to a white male for president. So this has become an additionally sensitive topic for us to address. Thank goodness our president is very, 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 very interested in diversity, pushing, and in some ways my guess is he's going to have to make up for what Risa naturally brought to the game, and he's ready to do it. There's got to be some level of compensation. But creating that safe environment has really got to be what we're all about. I think that when you hire people in the process, you've got to let them know that they're going to be, to your question, they're going to be a voice. They've got to be a voice. You've got a chap who I'm very close to named Dwayne Proctor. And Dwayne came in our organization years ago as a communications officer, just moved through the organization, and he's now largely responsible for all our DEI stuff, both in our grant making, but also internally. And he's got a mouth. Very eloquent mouth. He's just amazing. If you haven't heard of him or seen him, you got to look him up. Proctor. We are aligning with each other because he's found his voice in the organization, but went through years where he did not have his voice. And I am thankful that he was patient enough to wait that out, because now his voice is very strong, and we're good partners on pushing these issues institutionally. It's going to be a constant struggle for us. It's going to be a constant struggle for us. I wish there was an absolutely happy, well-wrapped answer to your question. But when you consider that we're 45 years in the business and we're just starting to do implicit bias training, and for many of you, you'll think, wow, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, we thought they had their act all together. No.
I have a question. I thought it was interesting, this idea of we aren't trained formally to know how to work, and therefore expectations can be different. So one thing I see in our current environment is workloads are very inequitable, and some people don't complain, what we see as players, others complain more, and so workloads are becoming more inequitable. How do you manage, because we aren't all trained under the same kind of expectations, how do you recommend as individuals we manage that? And I guess the culture.
I'll tell you a very simple thing we did that really, but folks have a hard time recognizing that, because if you know you can give it to somebody who's going to get the work done, as opposed to someone who needs development or lots of hand holding, what are you going to do? Your natural default is to give it to somebody who knows what they're doing. And their natural default is to take it. That might be old commercials, it might be illegal. So this is what we did to try to simplify that. And this goes to the point I made that I am not your smart guy. We did a draft institutionally, and we took cards for all of our staff members, and we took a whole day with the executive team in a room like this, but we had really great food to eat. And we put up everybody's name on a card, and we had trading cards for every single person in the organization, a bunch of them. So David Woolman had a trading card with like cute little face smiling on it with some information about me. And then we started to assign responsibility, zero-based. We're starting from zero. Who should do what? We saw some of our staff members subscribed at 400% of their weekly working hours. So if we use 40 hours, and we did in this case, as the sort of the norm, the working norm, we had some people who were at 400%. And when people said they wanted those people, those numbers went up. Well, you can only imagine the executives on the team were holding their head. They didn't even realize what they were doing. And it wasn't just executives, senior managers. So we had a lot of people who had their hands in doing what you said, in workload imbalance. By the way, we have big issues in the foundation about workload balance. We're doing a number of different things to try to even that out. But making it apparent to the people who were making decisions about this was the first step in the battle. It wasn't going in and analyzing how many emails somebody got or what hours of the day or night they were online or whether or not we should shut down our computer system so they can't email or whether or not they should delay their emails till 7 o'clock the next morning as opposed to send it out at midnight. All the cockamamie things that organizations do to cure an issue that is not curable. Glad you're laughing through those approaches. And we found out that we were the culprits. We were the bad guys in this. We were the ones who were overassigned. So then the question becomes, what do you do? Well, first of all, you try to shift workload. Secondly, you develop other people. You develop other people. You say, okay, great. So this is not your major league team. They're AAA. They're a farm club. They're promising, but they're not ready to move up to the bigs yet. What do we have to do to get them better? That started annual succession planning meetings. And succession planning, where I work, is huge, really huge. We most probably spend 20 person hours a year on succession planning. We just did an 8-hour retreat. We didn't get through a quarter of the institution. And in that succession planning discussion, we talk about development as a strong spot, not just who's going to grow up to be the next CEO of the foundation. Predict life, especially these days. Good luck. We talk about what development is needed. What are, there heard Jones window, do more of, do less of, stop doing. Look it up. It's a very simple tool to use. How do we talk about our staff in ways of developing that? And to that end, stopping to do some of the things that they're doing more of what we want them to do, and then what are we going to take off the plate? I always bring visuals to meetings, so I brought a plate from our dining hall that had food falling off of it. It was just piled up. It was really a shame and a waste, but I only did it on one plate. And I use that as a visual to show our managers that we keep piling. No, I've got an orange. I'm going to put that on the plate. No, I've got zucchini. I'm going to put that on the plate. So what do you do next to move that stuff off the plate? Again, this is not rocket science. It really isn't. How do we start to move? And what's the organizational risk by moving that off the plate? You know what? Most of the time, we were able to say nothing. No big deal. We can do without this because, you know, organizations like ours want to solve the problems of the world right now. So we take it on all comers. We do everything we possibly can. Another great idea. We've got funding to be able to support the great idea. We overwhelm ourselves. We eat too much at meals, and we are like when I was a little kid, I wasn't smart enough to know that I had enough ice cream. Somebody had to tell me. Well, we're now telling people got too much of it. So that work, and this is going to be a process long after I'm done at the foundation. But back to culture, getting the expectation in the culture that we care about this, we're doing something about it, and people are going, wow, you do care, you really changed something, then changes the perception of the executive team, who are just a bunch of morons, you know, self-serving idiots high above, into, no, they're working with us to try to change things here, and that creates culture. It creates trust, it creates safety, it creates a whole bunch of things. And by the way, it creates louder voices. And that's where human resources has to be good enough to accept those louder voices as opposed to being threatened by them. I want to give you the name of the book.
Are you gonna write a book?
I strongly doubt it. Although I've got to tell you that a workload is ran that weekend. This book you've got to get. I heard this woman at a conference recently. Her name is Britt Andriata, B-R-I-T-T, last name A-N-D-R-E-A-T-T-A. She was the chief learning officer for lynda.com. You ever heard of it? It's a online training resource. LinkedIn bought lynda.com. Her life changed dramatically, and she stayed on with LinkedIn. She's really good. And she wrote a book, and it's a great book. I was halfway through it when I was waiting to come in here. It's called Wired to Resist: The Brain Science of Why Change Fails and a New Model for Driving Success. Very long title. You can Kindle it. I think it's $5.95 on Kindle. It is one of the best books around how our neurology changes. By the way, we are naturally changed to resist, to protect ourselves, to fight. Okay, as animals, that's what we do. You've heard of the amygdala. The amygdala is your fear portion in the brain. When anything happens like that, your amygdala immediately says there's fear. I'm either going to freeze, I'm going to flee, I'm going to do something, but it's not going to be positive. This book is great at analyzing how neuroscience affects our ability to change. So, where was I before I went into it?
So as you can tell, we've moved into the question and answer period. We have about 15 minutes left. And one of the questions that we had for you is how you've worked with a number of CEOs. How have the CEOs been able to support you in your role? And what do CEOs need to know about human resources to make you as effective as possible?
The most important thing a CEO can do is either totally engage with their HR person or fire them. When Steve Schroeder was the first president I worked with, when Risa was the second president I've worked with, and now with Rich Besser, their challenge was either to make me a senior advisor to them and let them think about all the other more important things, or get rid of me. But never pigeonhole HR as an entity that's separate from you. I hate calling it HR. They call people, they call lots of crazy stuff now. I'm not sure I like any of it real well. But the person in the organization that connects with your staff should be the person who's running HR. And that person should be constantly that provocateur, saying the things that people don't normally say or want to say, and feeling comfortable that they're going to be able to find a way to support their family if things go awry. Any CEO, one of the best mentors I've ever had was a chap named Calvin Bland, who was our first chief of staff. And Calvin was one of, if not the first, African-American president of a major hospital, St. Chris's Hospital in Philly. There for 20 years, started as a program officer at the foundation, and then came back at the end of his career after the hospital. And he so influenced us in understanding that HR person or people person, or whatever you want to call them, has got to be almost the most senior advisor to the president. To stay focused on what is important to people. Your president doesn't really do the work. All your people do the work. Without those people, your president is nothing. The executive team is nothing. The whole executive team can huddle in a room and try to do the work, and they can't. So HR's role in the organization, any organization, anywhere, small, big, medium, should be right in the center. And they shouldn't be in the center playing the role of policy enforcer. People love coming to HR where I work. Part of the reason is we always have food out. I'm sure that dilutes a little bit their enthusiasm, but they're not afraid of coming to HR. They're not afraid of telling me or other people in the unit what's on their mind. That is exactly what you want. Because without that outlet, it's likely you're never going to get them to talk about what really needs to be discussed to make the organization as effective as it can be. It's not right. Again, if you take anything away, we met a guy today who's not the brightest bulb, who kept on saying that this is not rocket science. We make it into something much more complex than it has to be, and then as a result of that, because people's stuff is sort of icky and not square corners, avoid it. And most organizations that get in trouble with their people have usually been avoiding the issues. Sort of go, I've done a couple foundations where I went in and analyzed what they did in their HR operation, and the answer was avoidance.
We have heard from quite a number of CEOs who have talked about kind of the transition when they into their roles, and there's a lot of turnover and attrition when a new leadership comes on. Do you have examples or stories of how to manage that with all the people, right? And whether you're bringing on new people, we're experiencing a lot of that, and people are feeling a great sense of loss. It really impacts morale, and so just trying to think about how.
Well, I think you come at it on a few different fronts. One, we know that the stress in our organization with the change. Lisa was beloved. I don't think there was a person in the foundation that just didn't love her. She's that type of person and brilliant at the same time. So we started to put in months before she left all sorts of stress initiatives. We had our employee assistance program come in and talk about change, and then do individual counseling with staff who are feeling a bit concerned. In this transition, it is not likely that we will force anyone out of the organization. When Risa came in, right before she came in, we let go a good number of senior executives to sort of clear the deck for her. Even the approach on that, no one leaves our organization without their self-esteem intact. Ever. Ever. And if I can't do that, they should fire me. So that when we did let people go, they held their heads up. We helped them with what was next. No, we didn't give them a grant, we didn't create a soft landing, but we supported them and helped them cope with the stress and the change. And they told that story. Once again, how do you create culture? You have people talking about things that have happened to them in the organization. You don't have executives lecturing in front of the room. Every single one of the people that we separated with left with their heads high. And by the way, went on to fantastic jobs. We knew they didn't at the time because they were so nervous and scared of the change. And again, if you read that book, it so beautifully describes change and assimilation and readiness for change in very simple ways. We knew that this change was going to be staggering to the institution, so that when they told stories of growth, we celebrated them. We had teas for them and celebrated them and told jokes and did all the things you would do if somebody was saying, look, I'm going off to take a new job. And that changed the culture in a very positive transition. The transitions are always very tough. If you've ever dated in your life, wondering what to say to the person, whether you put your arm around them on the 3rd, 5th, or 7th date, whether or not you have anything in common, whether you tiptoe, I always make sure my teeth are brushed, my breath smells good, nothing negative comes out. All those sorts of things are the same things we're going through right now. Everyone's dancing around the president trying to figure out what he thinks and feels. And we did this with Risa. By the way, Risa was in the organization already, yet that made no difference because she wasn't president. When people become president, everything changes.
Question over here, I think.
Joe also had a question then.
Oh, and Joe? Okay.
I'll try to keep mine short so that Joe can get in too. So I'm wondering, our organization does not have HR. The closest we have is a director of administrative services, and her desk is overwhelmed. So she does facilities, she does a little of what looks like HR, she does program work. So she has a lot going on. So I'm wondering, how can we build a culture where we're more supportive of one another within the organization, recognizing that we do not have an HR individual, let alone a department?
you have anyone in your organization that cares deeply about people?
Yes.
If you've got at least one of those people at a level where they have voice into the organization, empower them to speak up, to talk about the people in the organization, how they work. We do the Gallup engagement survey. If you don't have an HR person and you wanted an easy, cheap way to get a sense of engagement in the organization, to then have evidence to present, do the Gallup. It's $15 a person for the survey. For almost no money at all, they help interpret it for you. They give you binders with things you can do. You don't need an HR person to do that, but it sends a very clear message. And again, if any of you are in a position where you're not HR responsible, but you care about people connection, creating a safe environment, attracting lots of different people, you should be moving.
Joe?
Joe, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Waldman. It's a great information. We are a smaller organization. We have about 3.5 employees, and I've been there going on 15 years. Our executive director, 24, our admin assistant, 23, and our part-time staff, about 10. And we're looking at adding another staff person. And we're trying to figure out the delineation of duties and how best to proceed forward, because we have a couple people who are, maybe one in particular, who is very reluctant about giving up the job responsibilities because they don't feel it'll get done the same. And I think I've been trying to approach it under the guise of it needs to be, like you were talking about, succession planning and what happens if the bus gets in an accident or the plane crashes and we're all gone, that everybody isn't going to be blind with the organization, that we're going to have things in place and people to cross-train. It's hard in a smaller organization, but I'm just wondering, would it be the scenario where you talked about starting at 0 and building up when we're looking at adding a new position?
First of all, it sounds like you get it based on some of the things you just said, but yes, it's exactly what I would do. So we're putting together a new puzzle, and I would involve everyone there in putting together the puzzle. By the way, as we put together the puzzle, some of the pieces are going to smack up against what you think should be the case for your own job. But I want you to be selfless. This is just an exercise. Just an exercise. No one will die. Be selfless. And let's try to put together a puzzle. Is anyone dying for and put together the puzzle that way. And then I would not move that into implementation. The biggest mistake we make is before people have had a chance to assimilate, to get used to the idea, we move our ideas into implementation, and they're not ready for that. I'd let them sit on that for a while. Here's what this new puzzle looks like. Here are the pieces. I'd say, great, you have a small number of people, you can sit and have coffee with them and say, as you take a look at this puzzle, you take a look at your responsibilities, what do you think? And then coach them through that assimilation. Usually people who care about an organization, and I'll bet you everyone who's working in your organization cares, especially because of the size, will understand the best interest of the organization as long as they're taken care of. As long as they're taken care of. It's not.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Am I doing okay?
You're doing great.
Yeah.
And we have does anybody have a last question that you haven't been able to ask yet?
I do. I'm interested to hear the diversity of thought when it comes to new CEOs coming into the foundation, and if the current HR person within the foundation plays a role in that hiring, or if the trustees just say, "We'll handle it."
Yeah, but that's a uniquely good question for me. We started our process about a year and a half before Lisa retired in April. The board chairperson came to me and said, I don't know a thing about recruiting. Can you help? And we marched out together and interviewed different firms and made decisions about that and just got closer than close. And he said to me, and I got to tell you, my knees started to shake when he said this, because I thought then I exit. I just make sure the firm's doing the work they're supposed to do. The board goes off and makes a decision. They kept me in as part of the process. Largely unheard of, and it was a blessing. I was in all the interviews. I did not have a final vote, but again, Las Vegas rules. Before anyone on the committee made a final vote, they forced me to tell them who I thought would be the next best top 2 people. And the reason they did that was because they knew I had a connection to staff, and they didn't want so much disruption. They knew there'd be disruption.
Right.
They want so much disruption that they thought it would get in the way of the progress we were making. And you know, the momentum recently started with us. It was a career experience I will never forget. And if I do ever write a book, it'll likely be about that and being the little person at the table.
And traditionally that
Never happens. Never happens. And I would argue it's because the HR people have not secured that level of trust and confidence in the organization. They're a policy person. They're a procedure person. They're minding the gates. They're a gatekeeper.
Because at our shop, as I think about it, our HR person reports to the CFO. Like they don't even connect to the president.
And I would argue that is a huge mistake.
Yeah,
now,
no.
Sometimes the HR person isn't good enough to report to the CEO, and you wouldn't want them advising the CEO because they've got that old-fashioned two-dimensional view of HR. But I meet with the chief HR officers from the top 15 foundations twice a year, and I got to tell you, there's no one in that group that wouldn't be a great advisor to their president. No one.
David, could I follow up with one quick question, please?
Sure.
One of the questions that my executive director and I have kind of had some disagreement on is when we're adding the position, she feels that we need to make sure it's a value-added position. But my viewpoint is that if we add a position and it frees up myself or her to do more value-added work, that it's still adding a value-added position.
Yeah, I mean, I free up my boss from doing work. I am the beast of burden. I never let my boss do the type of work I should be doing. And if they are, for the range they have and the salary they're getting, someone made a mistake along the way. I totally agree with you. Value added is not in and of itself. It's how it works, and especially in a small organization, it's how it interplays with everyone. I couldn't agree with you more. If you need somebody to write a note for you.
Thank you.
I'm curious in your thoughts about level of transparency within your role and function of the staff. I know that when I came in, I was surprised to learn that senior management team didn't have information about the salary bands. And as we went through these transition periods, trying to recruit for people and not knowing what that information would be was really difficult. So just, you know.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on transparency. When I think of transparency, I think of a very ugly animal with see-through clothing on. So it's and it's become overused. In my family, when I was growing up, my folks were fairly transparent, but they also didn't tell us stuff. And because of that, we never knew we were poor. Okay? I didn't know that until I grew up and said, oh, no, we were poor. I didn't know that. I never heard them talking about staying up at night worrying about paying the bills. We're doing a lot of the things that I didn't need to know. And I believe that's the case in organizations too. Because there's a lot of backroom stuff that goes on. That said, every single executive knows every single salary range, every single salary of our employees. They see their salary histories. I send so much data to them from a point in time when no data was being shared that they're actually going to stop. I don't want to make this simple for me. So I believe as reasonable, transparency is important. Openness is really the word I like to use. How open are you going to be with information so that the people who need it to make good decisions are making good decisions and are not making halfway decisions based on halfway information? But again, I think it's a thoughtful process. You know, I would say 85% of the time I default to transparency, and 15% of the time I say, this is something the kids don't need to know about. It'll just upset them, and it's not worked out yet, and there's no, and then we're going to have to deal with the outcomes of all this.
Well, I think we're at time, but David, thank you so much. I think it's given all of us a new appreciation for human resources and a lot of really practical ideas and great book suggestions. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm hoping that we will see a book come out of you because you can certainly help advise a lot of us. So join me in.
Way over this. Not nearly as good as the person that was supposed to be here, but that's just a teaser. And of course, lowering your expectations always makes things easier. Let me give you my email address if you have any questions. I'm up early in the morning online, so I always get to emails. I never miss emails. It's DWALDMAN@rwjf.org. And I'm more than happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Latisse. Thank you, Joe, Maren.